Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody. Welcome back.
Welcome.
We are full into the new year.
We are. And it's starting off cold, but I feel like that's very wintry.
It is.
And I think this is interesting. So before we started recording, you and I were both talking about how we're feeling this, like, we want to clean the dead space out in our life, like things that are just occupying space but aren't really bringing life. And so, like, there's a couple things we talked about, like, okay, we're going to change this, we're going to do this in our personal lives, in our business, in our just storage units, like things like that. And I feel like those are typically, that energy feels to me that it's typically like spring clean energy.
That's
but
true.
Also, like, there's so many things around the new year where people, like, I don't know, where you are making New Year's resolutions and looking back at the past year and what things do you want to carry forward and what things do you want to end. And like, that to me feels like very much so springtime energy. And so I've had this thought. I think the seasons of the calendar are off because like, springtime feels to me like new life, like the start of something. And January feels to me like death and like things that are quiet, and like the seed is in the ground, it's dead. That doesn't feel like, that to me feels like the end. It doesn't to me feel like the beginning of the new thing. Sure. So, like, my opinion has been like, oh yeah, like our calendar should start in like March or April, because that's like new life, that's the start of something. But I weirdly feel very much so that same energy right now. And so, like, I don't know, I just think that's a curious thing.
We've talked about this before, but I tend to quarterly, like, get this new year renewal. I don't know. It's a bit redundant to say it that way.
Yeah.
But it's like January feels like that. April feels like that. July feels like that. September feels like that to me. I know that's not exactly 3 months later, but there's like 4 distinct times during the year that really feels like that. And I don't think the January one really lines up with anything in the Hebrew calendar, but April is definitely like Pentecost and Passover, right?
Yeah.
And
the biblical New Year.
And then July. Is there something in July?
I don't know if, as far as feasts go.
I don't know, but July always feels new to me. I don't know why. It's not the 4th of July because I don't really care about that. And then September is always Rosh Hashanah, and that always feels like a renewal. So there's something in it. And I think we had this plan of talking about something, but can we shift gears?
Yeah, I was going to say, we're already talking about something else. Let's just go with that.
So we were talking the other day about the calendar and the natural cycles in creation of like 28 days. Do you remember this? We started to have this conversation the other day, and I thought it was so fascinating. And this is going to go somewhere, but we were talking about, like, the woman's cycle is 28 days. The moon cycle, or the lunar, I should say it like real people say it, the lunar cycle is 28 days.
Yeah.
Didn't you say if you broke everything out into 28 days, there would be 13 months plus a day in a year?
Yeah. So it's, if you take 365 days and you divide it by 28, it's almost perfect. You end up basically with like the leap year type thing, where it's like 365 divided by 30 is um I'm sorry, not 30,
28.
28, because that's what we're talking about, is 0.03. So every 3 years, you would essentially have a leap year, a leap day.
Right.
Uh, and so it's just interesting to me because it's like very much so the natural rhythm of things um, already.
Mm-hmm.
And it just is curious to me, like, yeah, we were talking about like, why don't we use that? Like, if that's the natural rhythm of things, if that's the
Right.
natural cycle of things, why isn't that the natural cycle of our of everything else?
Right. It's almost like someone decided to just go against the grain.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, as a woman, like that cycle is regular, right? Not
Yeah.
everybody is exactly regular, but it is like your body's in a rhythm, and it almost feels like the calendar tries to pull it out of that. You know what I mean? So it would be really handy if every eighth of the month or whatever, you just know this is when it happens, right? But as it is like it'll be a different day of the month, even though you're completely cyclical and it is completely regular and like clockwork. But for some reason, and even with the moon stuff, like, okay, we're not like new agey, like this kind of stuff, but it is
Right.
a very widely accepted and regaled thing that the moon has a cycle and it's 28 days. This is why like having a blue moon is so rare. It's like a full moon twice in one calendar month, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
because there's a 28-day cycle. And I mean, the oceans are controlled, like big parts of creation are all on this on this timeline. So why is our calendar so different? Like, who made that decision?
I don't know. I mean, I know. So I was looking at like the Gregorian calendar that we use, and because I was thinking that I remembered it was like a solar calendar, and it is, in that it uses a 365-day year,
Mhm.
um, because that's roughly a solar uh,
Cycle, like
cycle, I guess.
the
Um,
rotation with the rotation around the sun has been done.
we are so smart, guys.
We're like super smart, very
uh,
scientific.
but what I think is interesting is you could have your year based on the solar calendar, like it is now, and your months based on the lunar cycle, and both of those fit together well.
Mhm.
So I guess really what we're saying is we're starting a petition to redo the calendar. And I don't know what we're going to call the extra month that we're adding, but you know, I think that's what we're leaning for.
Hmm. I was gonna go in one direction, be like, we should just add a month of Jubilee, like just add after 7 months or after 6 months, make the seventh month Jubilee, but
Mm-hmm.
it still wouldn't even out. It wouldn't be even at all. But that's okay. Um, so with that, we were talking about this the other day and
Mm-hmm.
about the woman's cycle. And Josh, you were saying something about uh like in Jewish culture and Bible times.
Yeah, I want to say like Bible times. I don't have
Bible
an
times.
exact date, but probably maybe even like Old Testament, like tent dwelling times. That there was a like specific tent that was like for the women during that time. And we were talking about how, obviously we weren't alive then, not talked to anyone from then. So I don't know really what it was like, but that there's almost this like, you can look at it as this oppressive, get away from me. I don't want
Send the
you.
women away, they're bleeding. Like,
Yeah. Don't want it around. Or you can look at it as this like truly honoring time where it's like, okay, like this is a big deal. Like I feel like our culture tends to look at that with a kind of a, I don't know, like shame lens, like hide it, can what do
Sure.
everything you can to make sure it is the least noticeable, when really it's like a pretty significant thing that's going on.
Yeah.
And so there's this like, you can look at it either way. You can look at it as like, okay, we're going to like actually give the women a few days of rest every month to honor what's going on. Or you can look at it as like this like patriarchal, like
Oppression thing.
oppression thing. And I don't, I don't know really what it was like for the women at the time. I think a lot of the modern technologies have probably made that a much easier time for women to experience, but also like what have we lost the good while improving it? I don't know. I really don't know the answer. I've never experienced a menstrual cycle, so I don't
Not
know.
firsthand anyway.
Right. But I just think that yeah, we were talking about cycles and seasons and just how, yeah, I think that there is some truth in life in what that was that we don't have anymore.
Sure. I think it's interesting just because you can look at it from those two perspectives you're talking about. Like, you could get mad about it and be up in arms that women were like pushed away, um, had to go stay in a different tent away from their families, away from normal life during this time.
Mm-hmm.
But you could also absolutely see it as an honoring thing. And that is what kind of blew my mind when we were talking about this last week. Just because, like you were saying, there are these modern developments that make it probably easier to deal with. I think in one way, like in the bleeding way, but there's so much stuff
Mm-hmm.
that happens in your body,
Right.
like hormones completely shift, which completely shifts how you outwork, how you function, right? There are ways to deal with that naturally, but you have to actually address it and care for your body in that way. I mean, there's cramps, there's being tired, there's being moody, there's like these things that happen, and not for every person every single time or whatever, but there are things that happen in this cycle that I have to say, as someone who has spent more than half of my life like dealing with those cycles, boy, would it be nice to be like taken away from all of your normal responsibilities and given a space to just care for yourself and get
Yeah.
through this wild ride for a week. You know what I mean? And even to then be around other people who are doing it as well. And you know what I thought? I thought, okay, let's just hang on the premise that this is an honoring thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most people know that a lot of women who spend a lot of time together will sync up on their cycles, right? So it'll be the same 28-day cycle progression and stuff. But I think about these villages or these towns or whatever, so these tents that you share, and wouldn't it be interesting that there would probably be a week out of the month that tent is full, like almost all of the women are there during that week. And number one, how beneficial that would be for young girls who are coming into that, because
Mm-hmm.
they immediately have this community around them, and it's not something that is a shameful thing, but you get together and you can deal with these things together, and you can have a space in which to learn about this and like culturally know how to deal with it, which is not something that we do now. The closest thing we get to that is like tampon commercials
Mm-hmm.
or like maxi pad commercials where they pour a blue liquid on these things to show that they do a certain thing. Okay, so that for young girls, but then also it makes me think about What about the women who don't sync up? Like
Mm,
culturally and as a community, would that then show someone that something is a little off? Like, are they emotionally disconnected? Is there something that they need to address in their body that isn't functioning the same way?
mm,
Do they need extra care and nurturing? Like, I wonder about those things. Like, is there a week where there's just like one person in the tent?
mm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that piece is really fascinating to me because of that syncing up that happens.
Yeah. Well, it brings it to a much more community focused.
Mm-hmm.
Like you do have that support system when you're like going through this massive change in your body. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine also for the men who are the ones left, like all of a sudden there's responsibility that they're now doing that they weren't doing before, maybe gives them some respect like or perspective on that, but also like the community piece for like the young boys, like that's probably also like a really important piece for them to like, okay, now you're with the men for a week, like I
Right.
don't know, I just think that that's a, I think there's a piece of that that could be amazing if, but it really, I, you know, both of those comments go back to like the importance of community
Right.
and the importance of like, you know, we say like there's that like kind of colloquialism of like, oh, it takes a village to raise a kid, like, but how much better would the life be for the kid if there was actually a village supporting them in that, like,
Right. Right. Also, think about this. It's like a very sure way to figure out if you're pregnant.
yeah.
They're like, where's Susie this week? She's always here.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
It's
But
true.
but then again, it's a community thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then people know this has happened and to check on this person and then to be able to support them in that way. Just a
Yeah.
very interesting, like, what a shift in thinking, because that is not how it happens now. It is like, it's like you said, it's kind of become this little hush hush thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that when I was, I don't know, 12, maybe 12 or 13, whenever I like started getting my period, I was so ashamed of it. And I tried to hide it from anyone and everyone forever. Like, probably until after I was married. Well, maybe,
Maybe you still do.
maybe when I was pregnant with Henry, who was on a couple weeks ago, is the first time that I was like willing to admit to my father that I was anywhere near that cycle. Like, I wanted nobody to know. And why is it like that? I don't know, because it's the most natural thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's just a weird, it's weird that we've put such a stigma on it,
Mm.
And I think, like, I know all the technologies weren't there and all of the advancements weren't there and all of this in those times, but it almost makes me long to experience something that could be so community based and like honoring of a natural thing that happens in half of the world's population.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I agree. I think that there's a lot of things that happen in our bodies, in our lives that um that just really mm, don't get addressed on a public thing that I think create a lot of shame, create a lot of like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I mean, I even think about like sex from like the church perspective is such a abstinence, 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 but very few places that I'm aware of that actually teach healthy sex life for people and when you're married. And um And so there's just a lot about the body that I feel like as a culture we hide.
For sure.
And then kind of these weird, like it still has to be addressed because it happens. And so, but it gets addressed in weird ways instead of like actually healthy, constructive ways.
Right. I think about maybe a year and a half ago, there was this whole thing on social media. There's a certain like religion sect that is so conservative that they will not talk about sex. It doesn't matter if you're married or not married, like you don't talk about it. And then there was this thing on social media where all of a sudden it came out. There are all these people who were raised this way, maybe still are practicing this, and had absolutely no idea, even as a married person, how it works. And
Mm-hmm.
were hurting themselves and like couldn't figure out why they couldn't get pregnant. And it was like so shrouded and covered with shame that even the simple act of procreation, which I actually tend to believe is a privilege given by God, um, like they were unable to do it because they just had no idea how, and no one was willing to tell them. Do you
Mm.
remember that when that was all coming out?
I feel like I do. Like there's something in my mind that's triggering a memory, but yeah,
Uh yeah, I don't want to like call any like church group out or something,
sure.
or like that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just saying that there's such a stigma sometimes on these
Mm-hmm.
things. And it's such a part, like, okay, literally with sex, literally the human race could not go on without it. So why can't you talk about it? And then it's like now our culture is so much like there's such a stigma on it that now it swings the other way and like overdoes it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
There's no just like, hey,
Healthy
this
talk.
is real life. This is how your body functions. Like for men and women,
It's
like
for
that's
real.
that's very rare that that happens. And I think it's really important that there be quality people talking about it and that it's sort of like um yeah, like some of the shame about just this is how your body functions. I mean, imagine I can't imagine a young girl who starts her period and all of a sudden is like, I've never heard about this, I don't know anything about it, like something must be wrong, and then you just develop a like hiding culture of shame around that. Like I can't imagine what that does to the psyche of a woman. And I feel like there are aspects of like male development that are treated somewhat the same way for a lot of men. And it's just really, yeah, I think it's really unhealthy in the way our culture and especially our churches have handled it. And I would say our cultures have handled it unhealthily, sort of in a opposite spectrum of the way the church has. And I'm sure there are churches and communities that are excellent in the way that they handle it.
There probably are. I've just not experienced
Not
them,
exposed to them. Yeah.
but that's fine because I'm not exposed to a lot of things.
Yeah.
Which is
So
why, you know what, part of why we do this podcast is to get more perspective on things, right?
it's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Super interesting. I have a question for you, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just, it's a stupid question.
Okay.
But so, as much as a woman has a 28-day cycle, I've heard over the years that men also have a cycle. Um, I love it when people call it menstruating, but or menstruation.
Uh-huh.
But do you think that's true as well? And if so, what does that entail?
I've heard that men do also have a cycle, but that it tends to be like almost a day or it's a
Oh,
much shorter. And so
hmm.
there's a, and I know very little about this, but like I've heard that there is a hormonal cycle for men, but it cycles through much, much faster. And
That's interesting.
so
Is it like the tide? So like
maybe,
you know how, okay, so we talk about the 28-day lunar cycle.
yeah.
What about the daily cycle of high tide, low tide?
I mean, I would think there's no way that that couldn't impact your body because
We're 75% water.
we're majority water. And so to think that what affects the oceans doesn't affect us is kind of weird. Um, but just like, okay, I think about this in a woman's monthly cycle. There are times of that if you're in tune with your cycle, um, are better for certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have more energy or you don't have more energy, or like there's all sorts of different things that you can pay attention to. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, man, what if that was taught to everybody? And I do believe it's true, men have a cycle, whether or not it's a day or a week or whatever. I don't actually remember, but something like that, a shorter cycle. Well, what if men were educated on, hey, during this time, it'd be really great for you to like focus and read, or go work out during this time, or hey, during this time you need to be quiet and let your body like recoup. Like if we were just educated on the body and how it functions instead of trying to force it outside of how it normally goes, like that's pretty interesting. And I think about how we started this conversation and like how 4 times a year you experience like this renewing where you need to clean stuff out and do things. Like there's probably a reason. There's probably something going on either in your body or in the solar system that is impacting, like, hey, now's the time to get that done. Like there is a different energy for that right now. And if we knew how to pay attention to that, like imagine how fun the calendar could be if we just knew, like, hey, during this time, like it's a great time for me to go do this. And during this time, I need to avoid these certain things. Like, I just think that that could make the months, the years, the days so much more full of life.
For sure. Okay, so I want to go research a bit about like the more full or vast scale of the cycle, not just like the 1 week
Yeah.
a month or something, because I think that's fascinating. I've not even thought about it to that extent.
Hmm.
But also, I do wonder about the man thing.
Yeah.
I wonder if anybody has any extra insight on that. I think maybe we might reach out to a few people we know, maybe former guests, maybe people our listeners have never heard from. Because I'd be curious to know if they have an opinion on that,
Yeah.
like professional opinion,
Yeah.
and to hear whatever perspective they have. This is a fascinating topic to me. You know, like what if we could actually operate optimally because we're in tune with our body, and when it
Yeah.
needs to have the downtime, allow it because that's what it needs, and
Hmm.
not try to just push through. And when it has a bunch of extra energy, utilize it because that's what it's supposed to be doing right now. Like, what if we were there? Or what if we worked toward getting there? Or what if we actually listened? That's my big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. I'm reaching
Mhm.
out to some people today. Okay.
Let's
And I
do it.
also hope that if the listeners have any insight, I would love to hear it because I'm like really interested in like how this works.
Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting. Also, I did confirm on Google, men do experience a daily cycle of their hormones. And but then like I didn't finish reading the article, but it went on to say like there are like men experience it with testosterone the most because it's like the largest hormone in their body. And so generally at like sunrise or the morning, you experience this peak, this heightened of it, and then it dwindles through the day. um,
Huh.
but that there are other hormones and functions of the body that are impacted on a longer term basis.
It's really interesting. We weren't planning on talking about this. We had a completely different topic.
Yeah.
picked out. But yesterday I was on Pinterest, which doesn't happen very often, but I was on Pinterest yesterday, and on my feed somehow there was something about like detailed circadian rhythm,
Mm,
and it talked about that. It was like um where hormones have influxes and decreases during the day. Um and it talked about the increase of testosterone first thing in the morning.
yeah.
So that's really interesting.
So fun. This is a great topic.
This was a great topic.
Probably a bit out of our norm if you're a regular listener, but let us know your thoughts. Let us know your experiences. Like, would love to see the comments blow up on this episode and to get real people's opinions and thoughts on it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for sticking around. Listen for new episodes every Monday and Thursday. Find us on all social media platforms by searching for Market Mystics. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. Visit upperroomcd.com where you can find more information about the hosts, projects, and guests. Go deeper by booking a coaching appointment focused on redefining identity and wealth in your life. See you next time.